Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Forever Motorsports Conference. Sports it is Formula Time week every Monday. It is coming back. I do apologize there. Uh, I believe we should be back. Um, I think, nonetheless, we attempt again. We should be hearing us. Please let us know in the comments if you can hear us. I don't know how much you couldn't hear, but I believe it should be working. I do apologize. But we'll go from the second point, shall we? In case people cannot hear us, I'm hoping people can hear us. Do let us know. But nonetheless, if you can't hear us, they've just had this whole letter, which we'll continue now, provided you guys can hear us. Of course, please do let us know in the comments if you can hear us. Just having a slight small issue there, but nonetheless, I will continue reading. Hopefully, and let's just turn that down. So I'm going to go from the second point. The second, we will keep our heads held high and take this journey step by step together. We are Mercedes. We know the standards we aspire to, and nobody is flinching when we look at the mountain we must climb. It won't be easy, but there's value in something easy. But where's the value in something easy? I've made the mistake now. These are the times when character is forged, the times when a team becomes greater than the sum of its parts, tackling difficult problems and conquering them. We can hear you. Good. I'm glad. So I'm going to continue. We're together through thick and thin from Toto, Lewis and George, to every single woman and man in the factories in Brackley and Woodsworth, and we love that challenge. Third, we will be calling on each and every one of you two to power us to the front. Whether you're offering criticism or support, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way. We want our online community to be a safe space full of healthy debate, where people treat others and are treated with respect. They've made a mistake in their own letter. Be the team members, Mercedes fans, or rival fans. We have a zero tolerance policy on discrimination, abuse, or bullying of any kind, and we will take appropriate action to any comments or posts that do not meet our guidelines. And we want you to support. We want your support to make that a reality throughout our community. We're already hard at work on changing the course of this 2023 season. The recovery began immediately after the race, and everybody has a part to play. Are you ready to join us for the fight back? Question mark. If not, then there are no hard feelings. If yes, that is official letter from Mercedes to all its fans, to the world, about where they currently stand. How bold of a statement is that?
Yes, I mean, obviously very interesting to see that they already are showing that they do not expect much from the season, possibly. Obviously saying that they want to be able to get that car back to winning ways, but it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a very long road ahead of them. Interesting to see, though. I mean, first race, they've seen they're not competitive, and they're straight away going, apologize to the fans. I mean, we've seen Ferrari in similar positions over the years. They would never dream of doing something like this. Ferrari, obviously, don't take accountability very often. Only time they really do is when they apply team principles.
I mean, it's quite interesting, as you said, because it's so Mercedes. I mean, I know Mercedes, this team is based in Britain, but it's so German, as it were, in the fact that they've gone and directly apologized. We've made one bad race, and they've gone, no, this is not good enough. We've won the better races. We've won the better fans, and they've gone and directly said a whole letter to everybody, and they've gone and said, cool, we're useless at the moment. We will fix it. And that's after last season, where they were not particularly good either, and then the start of this season, of course, hoping they'd be better, and then clearly not in that very first race, and sincerely apologizing to all their fans for that performance. And then, as you say, you've got Ferrari, who've been dreadful for years, and they've never made such an attempt to connect with its fans like this. So hats off to Mercedes, but at the same time, very interesting and concerning again for their season, because it pretty much says we're out.
It's very much reminiscent of, of McLaren. They also put obviously a statement out earlier on in the season as well. I think also after the first race, just showing their disappointment, saying that they don't think they're going to be very competitive either. So I wonder if it is possibly a Mercedes engine as well that may be contributing. But then again, we have seen in the Aston Martin that they are competitive. So it's very interesting.
I mean, obviously the Mercedes' big difference to all the other teams is their lack of side pods.
Yes, of course. That zero side pod concept that they have based their entire car around just does not seem to be working. I think they really do now need to just abandon that. They've tried it for an entire year at a race. They've seen it doesn't work and move on. I understand it was a great concept to have. They thought it would work very well, but it hasn't. It's not. They need to.
So hopefully Mercedes don't, persist with this whole no side pods story. And what we also want to hopefully see is this weekend, what major changes will they have made from the last weekend, obviously being in Bahrain, to this weekend where we've got Saudi Arabia. Hopefully we'll see big change. But I mean, what could you possibly expect in just 2 weeks?
I think the biggest things we could see is users will change slightly, but that obviously helps the whole. We'll see possibly floor changes as well as see the zero side pods being changed just yet. I think they are going to maybe try another race to try and get that concept working. We saw it was competitive at the end of 2022. They might go back a few specs, go back to 2022. Scrap it.
I mean, yeah, it's just so much that's so confident in bold new moves that nobody was following, and everybody thought no, it would work. Mercedes had been so good, and they were just going to pave the way forward for everybody else, and everybody else was going to go, oh, flip, we should probably be copying Mercedes, but it's been the complete opposite. We're not touching anything Mercedes has done, because that's really not something we want to look at.
Well, the biggest thing is that they are not able to further to be faster. They're constantly trying to get their they're not getting any of their run plans done. They're trying to get that car working, which is really not what you want to be doing throughout your race weekend.
Yeah, so Mercedes got lots of work to do, and we're just going to go through this article as well here. Just the quote there: "We've got a lot of work to do. Mercedes promised visible changes to W14 after challenging season opener." Now, that's just extending on from their letter, which we will just go through the article now. But if you guys are watching, be sure to comment. Tell us, where do you think Mercedes stand right now? What can we expect from Mercedes for the season? Will Hamilton stay at Mercedes if this doesn't get fixed anytime soon? And just let us know in the comments. Do be sure to like the video and subscribe as well, so that every week you can participate in such a chat. But we're going to go through the article.
Yes, well, just touching on something that you said, will Hamilton stay with Mercedes? Well, from Bahrain to this weekend, there's been a lot of rumours going around. As per usual, there's always rumours going around the F1 paddock, but there's been rumours of Hamilton maybe looking towards Ferrari. I don't know if that would ever happen, but it would be very interesting if he left Mercedes to go to Ferrari.
I think it's not something that's going to necessarily happen immediately. Of course, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc contracted for quite some time to Ferrari.
I think Carlos Sainz's contract possibly ends at the end of this year.
I think it's the end of next season, or otherwise. It's but of course, Carlos Sainz still doing very well in that Ferrari, and at the moment, beating his teammate Charles Leclerc, of course, had engine problems. Well, problems with the car in Bahrain. So Carlos Sainz currently leading the way for Ferrari. So it would be very harsh on Carlos Sainz, of course, much younger than Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton starting to really get on in years, of course, and you'd have to wonder, these are big decisions he's going to have to make. Now, we go to the following. It says, Mercedes have shared more thoughts regarding their development plans for the 2023 season following disappointing return to the season opener at Bahrain Grand Prix, doubling down on the need to introduce radical modifications. Mercedes found themselves as the fourth best team behind Red Bull, Ferrari, and of course our big feature team for the season, Aston Martin, in both qualifying and race trim at Sakir, with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell's finishing almost a minute away from the victory in P5 and P7 respectively. After team principal Toto Wolff stated that Mercedes need to be bold with future updates amid questions over the squad's zero side pod design, trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin opened up about what's next, and he said the following: "People have tended when they mean side pods design. And Toto has said recently that we are looking at a revision that is going to come along in the next few races anyway," said Shovlin. Given the gap to the front, of course we are going to look at bigger departures and more radical changes, but those changes take time to turn into a faster solution in the wind tunnel. You can't do them overnight. There is quite a lot of development that you've got to do around any sort of big change in geometry in that area. Of course, we are looking at where we can improve the car. We are looking for potential to develop, and you will see visible changes coming on the car over the next few races. As for the biggest learning points Mercedes took away from the Bahrain opener, Shovlin pointed to significant tyre degradation as a cause for concern, alongside their general lack of pace. We've got a lot of work to do. Ultimately, we've got a lot of work to do. That gap in qualifying was quite large. We were over half a second to the front. In the race, that was even bigger, he continued. It says that was compounded by the fact that when you've got the tyre degradation, you get a bit more sliding, the tyres run hotter, and you end up finding it very difficult to keep them under any kind of control. There is a lot that we need to understand, but the key things are really getting on top of that long run degradation, which last year was a strong point for us. Clearly, we've got something that's not in the right place that we need to work on. But ultimately, the other big thing is the performance gap to the front. The raw pace of that car is not good enough. We are working very hard at the moment to understand what we can do in the short-term future and in the mid-term future to try and get ourselves in a better place. So we read that article there, Reece. What do you take away?
Well, clearly they're not happy. I mean, they won't be happy with the way that they're performing out on track. But one of the key points from there is that they are having tyre degradation issues, which is your biggest factor during a race. Obviously, you want your tyres to be able to run longer, to be able to have the longest stint as possible on tyres. That is one of the goals of strong. their race with Aston Martin, they weren't able to stay. Carlos Sainz wasn't able to stay ahead of that Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso because he was battling on the tires. He even said at one point, "Don't make me race them. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to the end if I keep pushing." So if Mercedes are also having those issues, it is quite a bit of concern because, well, they already have fundamental issues with that car, and now they're also struggling to make those tires work in a race. So they will be certainly looking at improving all of those small points throughout the next few races, throughout the practices.
And what do you guys think? I mean, what has Mercedes gone wrong? I mean, they talk about in that article, and the funny thing that I look at is there's not one or two or three or four issues. There's a problem with everything. There's something that they need to really fix.
It's their entire design, I think, just is not working as they want it to be. I mean, all the other teams have seemingly got to a point where they understand that car and they are happy with the way the car works. Mercedes are constantly in testing, or not in testing, sorry, in the practices of a race weekend, or trying new things on the car. They just don't seem to know how that car works and cannot seem to get them, get that concept working correctly.
Yeah, and of course, interestingly, the fact that the engine clearly not necessarily the one thing that's the problem. Clearly, an aerodynamics issue and a tire degradation issue, and just generally the car outside of that engine department, because the engine, of course, is being used by Aston Martin. Now, Aston Martin have been very quick, of course. So, will they perhaps look to their supporting team and the fact that they supplied the same engine to Aston Martin? Will they not look to Aston Martin car and say, well, what in that Aston Martin car should we look at and say, yes, we're going to more or less base our design on that and make improvements on their design, maybe?
Well, if they base their car on Aston Martin, then they're based in their car on Red Bull.
Correct.
Because Aston Martin have largely based their car on Red Bull for this year. I think it will be a bit of a slap in the face to Mercedes if they have to adopt that concept or that design, because they've been saying for months that they will not copy that Red Bull and they will not use that same concept that Red Bull has been so dominant with. But I think it's time that they have to abandon that zero side pod design. They have to go with a more traditional design because it's clearly not working right now.
And the interesting thing is, of course, there's three major aerodynamic versions of these cars. There's side pods and otherwise, and etc. There's the Red Bull model, there's the Ferrari model, and there's the Mercedes model. Now, only Mercedes follows the Mercedes model. Nobody else does. Then half the grid has gone with the Ferrari model, and half the grid have gone with the Red Bull model. Now, interestingly, we need to understand, is that Mercedes engine better than the Ferrari engine or not? Because then it will determine, because Mercedes surely won't try and create a new design upon what there is right now. Surely they'll just try and look to the other teams and say, well, what can we more or less take from that for the rest of the season? Because there's not enough time to develop something completely new.
Well, there's not enough time, there's not enough money. Obviously, we are in this cost cap era. They don't have the funds to be able to completely develop a new car. Because if they do that, they're not going to have the money to develop that car throughout the season. They're going to put all their money into developing that new car, and they're going to have to stick with that for the rest of the year.
Exactly. Anyway, and we look at the Ferrari model and the Red Bull model. Now, we say the Mercedes engine, is it quicker than the Ferrari model? So if Mercedes opt for the Ferrari look and feel in terms of the side pods and the general aerodynamics of the car and hopefully, the general structure of how the car is built. If they look at that Ferrari model and they say, right, we're going to more or less base ourselves on that, are they going to be quicker or slower than that Ferrari? And the only reason I say that is because the Aston Martin follows that Red Bull concept, where they're clearly quicker than the Ferrari, that Aston Martin, which follows that Red Bull concept in terms of how the bodywork will be put together. Whereas, is that all of the body and the engine working well together? Is the engine quicker than Ferrari and it's just a better aerodynamical car and better tire degradation? Or is the Ferrari engine better than the Mercedes engine, but because the bodywork of the Aston Martin is so good, it's quicker? So they have to make a big decision, because depending on which one they go with, they could either be slower still than the Aston Martin and the Ferrari, or they could be quite a bit quicker.
I think at this point in time, all of the engines are very similar in terms of horsepower. Obviously, that Honda is so quick down long straights, but I think they're all very evenly matched at this point. Obviously, they've all got a engine freeze at the moment, which means that they pretty much all run very similarly. So I think it's more down to the aerodynamics. I think Adrian Newey has just gotten that Red Bull in the sweet spot, and I think Mercedes just needs to develop their aero a bit more.
So Andrew, they're saying, why would Ferrari hire Hamilton over Leclerc and Sainz? Well, we weren't saying that they would, but nonetheless, that there are a couple of small rumours and people creating some stories basically saying, well, will Hamilton stay at Mercedes? And if Hamilton does leave, Ferrari is a team that have taken on past champions regularly, of course. So that is one team that there always will be a rumour.
Well, I think if they were to take on Lewis,
Phone is working. 2 seconds. Sorry, we
Well,
just lost time there. Yeah.
I don't think I would personally swap out either driver. Carlos Sainz has been a brilliant supporting role, and we've seen him win races as well. I think if you had to bring Lewis Hamilton into that team, it would certainly mess with the dynamic of the number one and number two driver. It would definitely cause a lot of friction, not only off track, but on track as well. As Lewis Hamilton is obviously such a strong character off track as well as very competitive on track. So it would definitely stir the pot quite a lot there for Ferrari, which I don't think they necessarily need right now.
Yes. And we talk about Ferrari, we carry on. We say, why have a students completely convinced that Ferrari can't check if this is working. There we go. Just looking at that Ferrari, of course, Charles Leclerc had a bit of a problem there, not able to keep going in that race. But we then go and look at the news here, and it says that the new team boss, Frédéric Vasseur, of course, says he has full confidence in the squad's ability to challenge Red Bull as the F1 season develops, despite their rivals starting in 2023 in such a dominant style. Max Verstappen led home teammate Sergio Perez in last weekend's opener for a comfortable 1-2 finish with third place Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, some 38 seconds adrift. Meanwhile, the lead Ferrari of Carlos Sainz and lead Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton crossed the finish line almost a minute behind as both drivers battled with tyre degradation. It compounded an already difficult day for the Scuderia, who lost Charles Leclerc in the closing stages due to an unspecified power unit problem, raising questions over their readiness to challenge for title glory. So, Vasseur has highlighted Ferrari's pace in qualifying as a reason to be optimistic moving forward, given that Leclerc lapped just a tenth slower than Verstappen on the first Q3 runs before opting against another lap to save tyres. Asked if he has faith that Ferrari's current car can be developed to challenge Red Bull in the coming races, given Mercedes' plans to go radical with future updates, Vasseur stated, "I'm convinced, completely convinced about this. I never saw a car able to match the pace of another one in quali and not be able to be in that race. It's a matter of setup and some choices on the car. It's not a matter of concept at all." I mean, that's a huge thing.
Well, no, of course, we've seen that Ferrari is so dominant. I don't think there's anything wrong with the concept fundamentally. I think it's just, as Vasseur says, some setup changes. I mean, Max Verstappen and Red Bull obviously still not 100% happy with their setup in Bahrain. So they could also possibly be quite a lot faster. But I think if Ferrari, Carlos Sainz, that car into the sweet spot, they could also be extremely competitive. I mean, we saw, we heard that over the winter season, winter break, they were able to fix issues that they had in 2022 with their engine. They were able to unlock another 30 horsepower obviously this isn't affected by the engine freeze, as they've been turning down their engine throughout 2022 for reliability. Then seemingly over the winter break they were able to fix that, but then in Bahrain they had another reliability issue. So is it going to be a factor that they're going to have to turn those engines down again? That could certainly affect them throughout this year. If they're able to get to the bottom of that, that could help them be more competitive again as well.
Now, I just want to finish up looking a little bit at this article here. And it says, Vasseur also pointed to 2023 being the longest campaign in F1 history, with 22 more races still to come between now and the season finale in Abu Dhabi in November. He is, though, naturally keen to understand their performances and reliability issues as quickly as possible, in a similar vein to Red Bull when they encountered technical woes early last year. Start with a DNF, and I would have preferred to finish like Red Bull for sure, he said. He joined Ferrari from midfield runners Alfa Romeo over the winter. But now I want to stay consistent in my position. I told the team before the test in Bahrain 2 weeks ago that the championship won't be over in Bahrain. Doesn't matter the result in any case. It was true for the winter test, and it's true for the first race. The most important thing now is to be able to have a clear picture of the situation, where we are failing, do a proper analysis of this, and to come back stronger as soon as possible. So, Ferrari, of course, sit currently fourth behind Aston Martin, Mercedes, and Red Bull. So, another thing I'd like to talk about when it comes to Ferrari is if you look at last season as an indicator for possibly, which you can't really, but nonetheless, I'm going to do it. I'm going to speculate. I'm going to say Ferrari last season started very well. They were leading Red Bull quite convincingly in those first opening few races, and then dropped off. That's when the reliability issues started hitting a lot more and things. Whereas Red Bull started poorly, of course, 2 DNFs in the same race, and they quickly tried to fix their reliability issues and then went back into it. Do you think Ferrari could do the same thing?
I certainly, I know Ferrari are going to fight it out throughout the entirety of the season. They are not going to give up after the first race, as Vasseur has said. I mean, it's only the first race. Sure, you've had a little bit of a reliability issue. Same as last year, Max Verstappen was out in the first race, went on to take the World Championship. Obviously, you can't try correlate last season with this season. It's completely different. I mean, but one of the most interesting aspects is that, of course, Red Bull are not able to develop their car as much this year. They may have gotten off to a very good start, but the other teams are able to catch up a lot easier through development this year.
And of course, now that everybody's seen that Red Bull in that first race, they're going to look to the things that did right, and they're going to look at Aston Martin as well and say, well, what did you do right? Because you're in a similar budget to us as well. And they're going to look at that and say, hey, that's what we're going to do. And hopefully what we will see is some more competitive racing as the season carries on. I do think a lot of people are making assumptions about the season very early, including us, let's be honest. Yeah, but nonetheless. But of course, we've got the longest season coming for forever. We've never had such a long season in the F1. 22 races still to go, not just one. 22 races still to go. Lots and lots can happen in that time. And hopefully what we see is Mercedes fix somehow. They've created a drastic fix. They said they're going to do drastic things. Hopefully they do. Ferrari will hopefully fix reliability issues and maybe try and improve on the track in terms of the tyre degradation problems they had. And we'll see Aston Martin maybe even still improving and challenging even Red Bull right at the top. It could really turn into one hell of a season to watch.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, obviously, we have the Saudi Grand Prix this weekend. Very exciting. If you are able to, please do join us in all of our live streams. We will be going live for every session, including practice 1, 2, 3, qualifying, and the race on Sunday. But just back to you now, Mark. Who do you think will be competitive out in Saudi on Saturday and Sunday?
Well, I think it will likely be another Red Bull 1-2. Let's be honest, Red Bull had no issues whatsoever in Bahrain. There was not a single thing they were concerned about. Bahrain was as perfect as you could possibly ask. The only thing they have to get through is basically the start of the race. If they can avoid any collisions, I back Red Bull to get another 1-2. But it's be interesting to see how much closer the race is, of course, because it's a much more challenging track than Bahrain. It's a lot more twisty. It's a lot more narrow in some sections as well. It's quite a difficult track in comparison. So we look at the other teams and we think, well, let's see what Ferrari and what Aston Martin can do in that track. I don't think it's way too soon for Mercedes to rapidly turn that around, but hopefully Mercedes can somewhat get some good testing done essentially this weekend with regards to how they can change their car. So I'm saying Red Bull 1, 2, and Fernando Alonso in 3 again. I reckon that'll be the same thing again, but I reckon both Ferraris will be in 4 and 5.
Yes, well, I think we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, this weekend. Obviously, practice 1 will be a good indicator. Obviously, not for Mercedes, as they will probably be doing some testing. We should see a lot of aero being tested on that Mercedes, not only in practice 1, probably in practice 2 and practice 3. But it should certainly be a very exciting weekend to watch. Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, obviously such a great race. We saw last year how close some of those cars were able to race. So hopefully we will be seeing the Ferraris and Mercedes, or Ferrari and Red Bulls, and possibly those Aston Martins all fighting it out for P1.
100%. And if you guys have any last minute comments to ask us before we head off, please be sure to ask us right now before we go and say goodbye. Otherwise, you have been watching Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports. My name is Mark. This is Reece. Catch us every Monday. We do a live show, of course, where you guys can discuss and we capture all the news in the last week. And most of the time, of course, it'll be right after a Grand Prix. And we'll recap that whole Grand Prix in this Monday live show. And that'll be next week, of course, after the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, which will be so interesting to see what happens. As I say, guys, very quickly get comments in if you guys want to ask anything. Otherwise, we are going to be heading off. And of course, we will do a preview show on Thursday, and even more pertinent on Thursday. Be sure to go and look at our other channel. If you go and look to our partner channels on Forever Sports, we have Forever Sports Extra. We will be racing Saudi Arabia on Thursday with the whole Forever Sports team. Everybody will hopefully be there. We should have a very large race of about 7 to 9 of us even, which will be really, really cool to, of course, see. And we can go and have a good laugh at that and have an idea as to what the track is like, and even better yet, how stupidly fun and how stupidly we drive when we go and do Saudi Arabia compared to those professionals who will be racing on the weekend. Until then, guys, thank you so much for watching. It's been Reece, it's been me, and we will check you again very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.